I think we have a few big things in the world that are defining the world that we live in right now, and I wanted to mention them. Global warming is number one. And I'm really happy to see that not only are the world leaders working on this, but Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, is being investigated by the SEC for lying to his shareholders about this risk. Thank you, SEC, and please convict this man. So, I believe that we have to take this really seriously. This is not a political question, this is a science question. The science is pretty much ongoing but done. And the ship is sinking. And when the ship is sinking, what do? You patch the hole in the ship. So we need to really be grown-ups about this. I was talking to our governor, Jay Inslee, who's a really great guy, and he understands global warming. And we had a laugh about this. Said, we brought this to the White House. We had a solution for this. And we hit this roadblock, which was, well, I can buy CO2 cheaper on the street than getting it from the coal-fired smokestacks. And I said, yeah, okay, but what's the cost of the planet? And Jay started laughing. He said, yeah, what is the cost of the planet? No one's ever done that calculation. So let's get the externalities all together in the accounting budget, figure out what we're dealing with here, and just solve it right now. We need to have leaders stand up and go, yes, this is a crisis, this is an emergency, it is life-threatening, it's going to cost us hundreds of trillions of dollars, more money than we can even dream up in our worst nightmares. Let's just solve it. And if we get our leaders to do that, if we support them doing that, we'll solve it easily. If we keep screwing around taking marching orders from the coal industry, we're all dead. So let's just figure it out, solve it, and then go out and have fun doing something else. All right, enough of that. Number two, energy is really interesting. So energy prices, I'm very proud of that call, by the way. Thank you, Sharon, for mentioning. I'm the only guy in the world who made that call. Prince Al-Walid said it was impossible to make it. We got that call within like a week of the price drop. And it's probably Sharon said, I think in our lifetimes is one of the two most important, not things, but economic things that we've seen. So it has changed every part of geopolitics. The price of oil, it turns out, is pretty important. And so I'm mentioning it now because I think that oil prices stay down. And there are people who don't know very much about oil who think, oh, it's just like corn, it'll come back up. Wrong, it won't. So we're done with the old days. It's never coming back ever again, which was part of the call we made back in May. And so my guess is for the current year, going forward, you can watch Saudi Arabia trying to jiggle it. Yesterday, had an OPEC meeting, tried to make it, no luck. And what's going to happen is $40 to $50 with occasional spike up, but basically $40 to $50 for the next year. And that'll affect a lot of different people. Number three, I have a very strange sentence I want to share with you, but I think you'll remember it. This just came to me one day, and I was thinking about all the problems we were having with radical Islam and terrorism. Every day there's a new thing. We now have shooters every week. The evolutionary consequence of war is to make your enemies perfect. Think about that. I mean, evolution, you know what evolution is. So the evolutionary consequence of engaging in war over time is to eliminate those who are not good at fighting you, so that as time goes by, you've killed the ones who are not very good, and they've killed the ones of you. And so in a true Darwinian sense, you make your enemies perfect. Bad idea. Part one of this is radical Islam, or ISIS, makes Snowden irrelevant. Mr. Snowden doesn't matter anymore. He did yesterday, doesn't tomorrow. We are no longer going to ask the Parisians, ask the French government how they feel about surveillance. They can't buy enough of it. And how quickly we forget 911 when we couldn't either. And so, we're human, we're fallible, we kind of forget things, but we're in this one for the long term. And we will not forget every time we go through one of these things again, there are going to be a lot more of these coming up, that surveillance helps. Well, it doesn't matter whether you live in Germany, you don't like surveillance, it doesn't matter. We have some German friends with us tonight. It just doesn't matter. So each country will have its tragedy, like Paris, like 911. We'll resign ourselves to the fact that we want to buy surveillance, not fight it. And the problem won't be surveillance. The problem will be having the right leaders so that they don't do the wrong things with the information. That's the problem. The problem isn't the camera. The problem is who's behind the camera. All right, and part B is kind of interesting. I think that the Saudi family, we don't often think about them, long the prime financial supporter of the Sunni fighters, is itself at terrific risk this year because they're facing two things: increased costs supporting ISIS. They pay for ISIS, guys. They spend over $100 billion a year on the things that drive ISIS. And they're also facing low oil prices in an unstable political environment of their home country. So I think they're going to have a bad hair day this year. And then last and not least, the China crash. So on May 25th, made a call. China was experiencing or was about to experience a domestic economic crash. And I believe that was a really great call. We made the call again in July a couple times with special alerts. Janet Yellen went on television yesterday morning, to my great distress, and assured everyone that China's fine. It'll be a low, slow, moderate glide path. Don't worry your heart about anything. I think she's completely wrong and either ignorant of how China works or, for political reasons, doesn't want to publicly discuss what China's facing. But if we had the 7 members of the Standing Committee with us right here, right now, they'd be in a cold sweat. And I think they're probably meeting nightly, having OSMs, if you know what that means, trying to figure out how to possibly get out of the situation they've gotten themselves into. I don't think there is a way out, a clean way, a nice, moderate Janet Yellen way out. So sure, they have control of all the media. Sure, they have control of the entire country. Sure, they can jail anybody who writes a nasty column in a financial paper, which they've done, or they can lock up the equities markets because it's not going their way. But in terms of what's really happening financially or economically inside that country, pretty clearly they have overstepped themselves in terms of too much goose in the economy, too much fraud. And the result of all that's going to be pay the piper. And that's a big story for the year 2016. We don't know how it'll come out. I think it's, in some ways, it's good that they are a dictatorship of sorts because they can buffer the rest of the world from what would have been, in America, an immediate collapse. But even having the ability to slow things down into slow motion doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means it takes a longer time for the bullet to hit the target. So my personal opinion is that China is having a gigantic domestic collapse, and they don't have the tools other than propaganda to deal with it. We'll do questions at the very end of the evening. So that's the 4 big things. I think those 4 big things are going to drive the world this year, in addition to all the stuff we'll talk about right now. But those are very large-scale issues. So let's continue with China for a minute. By the way, I want to stop for a second. We have Evan. Are you here? Please stand up. So we've been working very hard on this question of the Chinese domestic economy. The Department of Justice just told us that we have done a better job than anybody ever in describing the national business model. Evan did that. And we've been working hard together on sharing this information with people who need to know about it. And Evan, I'd like to come up here for a minute. I'm going to take a little 2-minute, 3-minute hiatus because Evan's been taking a break from his research as research director for us to save lives. And he's been doing amazing work. I'm very proud.
Thank you. So I've thought about what I was going to say up here for a bit. And it's difficult because I like to think of myself as a well-spoken guy. But sometimes words evade me. And in this particular case, I found myself at a complete loss for how exactly to describe Dr. Megan Coffey, who's sitting right here among us. If you want to stand up, Megan. And the closest I could ever get is that she's a good friend of mine. She's sometimes my boss, and she's one of my biggest personal heroes. When I first met Megan, she was living in a tiny, very strange little hut on top of a metal shipping container made out of plastic bottles in a weird hippie compound in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, about a year after the massive earthquake there in 2010. And she had been running a tuberculosis clinic and also subsequently an AIDS clinic out of the General Hospital, which is, when you picture a general hospital, you picture something probably, if you're from the United States, like what you see on TV, and that is not what the Port-au-Prince General Hospital looks like. So Coffee had been working there for over a year, living in very dire conditions, which we all did at that time, and just every day getting up and going to work for 14 hours a day with limited resources, and with a lot of these patients coming in very, very ill, much more limited time to try and cure people. And she's been doing that ever since. And I don't think that I really do have any words to describe what exactly that looks like on the ground or what exactly that means to these people. But it's probably the most inspiring thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So we just wanted to introduce Dr. Megan Coffey. And knowing the SNS community, one of the things I'm always most proud of being from this family and from this organization is that we find the most amazing people on the entire planet, the smartest, the most motivated, and also the best, most kind-hearted of that group. And I think that we all probably know someone who may have a way to help the TKI Clinic, which is the name of the clinic in Port-au-Prince. We may have people that we know that are developing new technologies that could be incredibly useful, or that are incredibly motivated in some small corner of what Coffee does with their clinic. So if you have any ideas, we're going to be in the lobby bar later, and I know some of you out there are probably already cranking away with some of the most brilliant minds in this country. And if we could put a little effort towards figuring out some solutions for TKI and for Dr. Coffey, I would be immensely grateful. Thank you very much.
We are an unusual group, and we're really honored to have Dr. Coffey with us. And I'm really honored that Evan spends his time not just researching China, but also saving lives. So back to China for a moment. We've come up with two ways of describing what we found, and you're about to see a very large-scale news story pop on this, so you're going to get an advanced view of this. But we found two acronyms. One of them is ICBM, and the other one is SAD. And what we really found was that up to half, we just did a BBC program in this, light bulb moment during a deep dive on the research on this, what is the national business model of Japan, what is the national business model of China, up to half of the GDP of China is based on theft and fraud. I don't know if that's good to clap, but it wasn't conceivable to me that that would be possible for a major part of the global economy to be true. It's hard to imagine if I said to you that were true of any other nation. You wouldn't think it's not possible that up to half of the GDP could be based on things which aren't real, which are theft and fraud. So it was hard for us to get our arms around this, but we're now convinced. And the two acronyms are SAD, so steal other people's ideas and inventions, amplify them inside your own country, and then push them out at half price and dominate and destroy those who invented those things. That's the model. Works great. We can spend another hour or two with you giving you lots of examples of companies that are already gone where this worked really, really well. And the other one is ICBM. So the things aren't, this is all not ICBM, so innovations, I, are not innovations. Companies, C, are not companies. They're owned by the state or controlled by the state. Banks, B, aren't banks. They're just these gigantic sewage pipes they dump stuff through, and then there are garbage cans at the bottom to collect the bad loans. You never see them again. There's no accounting. And money isn't money. How do you describe that? It's very difficult to get your arms around this. But it's ICBM. None of these things are what we would call what they would be here, or in France, or in Germany, or anywhere else you might have a normal conversation. So it's very difficult for any American, or I think for anybody in Europe or Australia, to understand what we're talking about. And it takes a little bit of mental effort to get there. But we will encourage you to make that effort, because this is now the second or third or first, whatever you want to call it, largest economy in the world. So it's worth our understanding how it works. The difficulty, therefore, will be, how's China doing right now? Well, anything they do, it's just like you're in a bathtub with the big guy or football player. Everything they do matters because the water level will change. And in this case, you've got two things going on at once. One is immediate wealth over the last 20, 30 years based on theft and fraud. Well, that worked really well. That is a short-term, how to be the richest guy in the world model. But then there's this other problem, which is we call it stimulus. We call it spending too much money on infrastructure and so forth. But what it really is other people's money, not your money, coming in to build things that you stole, and then building more than you needed. And I'm going to put an idea forward, which I think is an interesting idea. In business, you have to make a profit or you go out of business. A country needs to be productive. It has a productivity ratio. Hopefully it goes up 2%. Steve probably knows it. It's 2% per year, 1.5% per year. You try to become more and more productive per year. And that's how you make money as a country. Well, what if a country was negatively productive? What if it took in more than it gave out? Well, let me explain something. The national business model of China, we call it infomercantilism, is designed, as all mercantilist models are, to be asymmetric in trade, more exports than imports. If you think that through, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. Well, what if you take more money from the world than you give back? Is it possible to have a black hole, this being the 100th year of general relativity, is it possible to actually have an economic black hole, a country with very large size, which takes in more than it gives back to the global economy? And if that existed, what would happen? So that's what we're seeing now. There is this overall story that I'm describing, and then there's this tension inside China, if you're on the standing committee, between the success of yesterday, becoming richer than your wildest dreams, doing a great job of making a lot of people better off, and then this other tension from overdoing it too fast for political reasons and creating a fraudulent situation, which is a house of cards which is about to collapse, and for which you have no solution, because you've been solving this solution for a long time, and that's where they are. I don't know what the result will be, but I do think they're crashing now. So the question isn't economic, really. They already have crashed. The question is political. Can they hide the crash and muffle the noise for a long enough period that it's relatively benign for the rest of the world, or will it be difficult sooner rather than later for the rest of the world? Japan. Well, we were just publishing a book. I think you should all buy the book. It's called Stealth Japan. Scott Foster wrote it, who's our Asia editor, brilliant guy. And what it says is this model, Infomerc, is really quite successful if it's managed properly. And Japan has gone to what we call stage 3, where they took this export asymmetry and they offshored everything. So when you hear people say things like, oh, all their workers are too old, all their workers are in some other country. They're in South Carolina. They're in India. So the winners are intended to be the export guys, and they're offshore. The money, if you look at a table of where does the money go for the export, the number 5 country is the Cayman Islands. Well, they're not buying Toyotas over there. They're just shipping cash. So obviously there's a really interesting side story, and Scott has captured this. I encourage you to read it. You can go to our website and buy a pre-release copy of it. But it tells the story of the success of this model in terms of what they wanted to do, which was to favor their exporters. And their exporters have not only been favored and won, but they've gone offshore and become almost independent of the domestic economy. Their cash inputs don't even show up in GDP. So no one knows anymore what Japan GDP is because it's happening offshore. It's fascinating stuff. All right, so Japan's doing well, and I think better than people will think. South Korea, my guess is that as China continues to go after Samsung, which they're doing, the head of South Korea, who's really great pals right now with Xi Jinping, will review her alliance, and President Park will decide that that's not doing her very much good. In terms of the EU, refugees swamp all other economic plans. So you've all seen the story, and it's a daily changing story. The Schengen Agreement is going to go away. I don't know whether it gets dissolved, suspended, or whatever, but it's not going to be in play. People will be checked at every border. They're now, I think this morning, Angela Merkel says they're shipping back all the Balkan and East European refugees, 150,000 people going to take it out of Germany. So this is getting very interesting, and it makes sense because you can't take 12 million people, which is about the right number, I think, out of Syria into Europe. There's just no way to do it. So aside from emotions and passions, this is a math problem, and it's not solvable the way it's going to happen. The only way it will get solved is if things that are now underway keep going, which is that all of these nations that are worried about this solve the problem at its root, which is inside Syria. That's the solution. Make it so that people don't have to run away anymore. And I believe that'll happen. UK, Mr. Cameron has sold all of the China to China. So every part of the country that has a moving part has been sold now, essentially. The infrastructure, the nuclear plants, I mean, make a list. And it's troubling, I think. What's going to happen now, as far as I can tell, is probably the United States' special relationship with the UK, which began to dissolve when George Bush fraudulently took us to war in Iraq and dragged Tony Blair along for the ride. And the British called him a poodle for doing it. He was just being a loyal soldier, by the way, in my opinion. But he to preserve the special relationship, he did that. And now he's a joke in Britain, I guess. And you've got David Cameron just doing the opposite. So the British are very anti-U.S. Right? They've been through the ringer on this. They hated it. They recognized that we were not acting in good faith, and they don't like us for it. The result is David Cameron's gone completely the other direction, and it's like China first, everybody else get in the back seat. To me, that means we need a new partner, and my guess is that our new partner is going to be in Europe. My hunch is it'll probably be Germany. And it's a tough thing to do because the Germans have their own laws. They're different from our laws. We'll come back to that in a minute. But my feeling is we're moving more toward that world and away from the old special relationship. I think Tony has sold Britain down the river. Australia is going to be a tough ride. Long, slow, tough ride down. They're a total resource economy. Essentially, a third of the country is owned by China. I don't see a good way out for them. In India, disappointing because, as those of you may have read SNS last week, everyone was so hopeful that Modi would bring a change. And in fact, he has not brought a change. So he's run into the same problems everybody else ran into, whether it's lack of infrastructure or things like that. India is not going to be a repeat China. It's not going to be just like some other country. It's got its own problems in terms of corruption and infrastructure, and it's not going to grow that fast. In fact, it's going to slow down. And if you read this piece by Rafiq Dassani, it turns out that instead of seeing themselves as competitors to China who might benefit by China's stumble, they see themselves as having troubles because China was their supplier, and now they're going to have more economic difficulties because they can't count on China. Okay, so tech landscape. I think we're moving from the trivial to the heroic. And Harris probably love hearing this story because you know I'm a believer. But we're leaving a time when, think of a unicorn, right? Unicorns, that's a smart high school kid who could program that product in 2 weeks at home. That's a unicorn. Facebook, that's a unicorn. Twitter. And what it means is, you get a jillion users and you're going to sell ads to kids who have no money. That's your plan, and you become a $1 billion evaluation company for doing that. Come on, that's stupid. So I think we're going to move from that to the opposite of that, which is really serious science, really serious technology, things that are a slower grower. They require investment, and they create deep change, not just sending each other pictures and tweets. So one example to me is Amazon. You picture Amazon, where they started, we sell some books and some CDs. Okay, that's a good idea. Kind of a Twitter play, but better. But now what are they doing? Well, now what they're doing is they've got Alexa, they've got a brand new internet assistant. They've got AWS, which is minting money for them more than any other part of the company. They're going to own cloud computing worldwide. That's not a bad move. And they're making engines for Boeing for rockets. Well done, Jeff. So clearly these are deep investments, difficult things to do, multi-year projects in secret. They finally come out after 5 years, whatever, and boom, there they are. And that's what Jeff thinks. I think Jeff's on the right track on that. So that's a perfect example to me of the move away from trivial and into heroic. And well done, Jeff. Couldn't be better. All in all, this means to me we're entering the era of bits. So this is a little bit different. Biology-inspired technologies. To me, that's 2016. When I think of what's going to happen that's really exciting this coming year, bits are exciting. So here are some quick examples. Brain-inspired computing, you've all heard about it. I won't spend any time on it, but it's a huge thing. We just talked about it here. It's very important. It's driving Google's work. It's driving all search engines. It's driving predictive analysis. Brain-inspired computing is here to stay. Pattern recognition processors, which we coined, we're just starting to see the first ones show up. True North showed up. We'll see many more pattern recognition processor chips which look at the raw data of the world and bring us brand new understandings that we never had before. The pattern computers. We came up with a computer design at FIRE a month ago. Very excited about it. We have a new company called Pattern Computer Inc. And the idea is to make a computer architecture which does that exact thing. So maybe we could take a quantum computer as a coprocessor, which Vern's talked about, and we'll take the True North as a coprocessor, and we'll actually harness the power of these things in their own ways, and we'll have an architecture which allows them all to lie together with a shared memory of some kind and go like crazy against the world, looking for patterns that we didn't expect ahead of time. How brains work. So signaling and messaging systems. Picture, so far we've been like doing fMRIs and, that's nice. But what's really happening is we're starting to learn about signaling and messaging. This is very computer-like. How do cells talk to each other? Nerve cells have a lot of things going out there, the synapses. But essentially, whether you're looking at a brain or a body. So the next thing for me is cells. How do cells work? We don't know how cells work. We have very little information, but we now have some tools that will allow us to look in real time at a living cell without freezing or killing it and watch things happen. And we're developing very quickly new techniques, not just staining, but better techniques for understanding how does the protein move from the RNA molecule back to where it's supposed to do its job. How long does it take? What is the impedance by other molecules being in the way? So what you're seeing is a 3D wet computer. This is not a new idea. But we're now finally able to look at it and understand what it is. Not just say, I get the concept that it's a computer, a biological computer, but actually, how would you make a computer if you used a cell? How long does it take in travel time? How heavy is that molecule? Does it bump into things on the way? Do you have to make 5 of them because it bumps into all these questions that would come up in evolution that have already been solved? We'll have a chance to take pictures of and figure out and understand a brand new way. Should we apply this to our own understanding of how to compute? Good question. I think we should, but we don't have the information yet. Nutritional microanalysis. So I see every day, we invented this term for a new medical field, but the idea is, what are you eating? What are you drinking? Don't just look at the thing that says so many carbs, so many fats. And now I think increasingly we're seeing not just a health concern, but a deep concern. What toxins were in that thing? Where did that come from? What country did that come from? Where did that go through on the way to me? Did somebody stick a toxin in there by accident? Was it on the floor? Was it in a bottle? Did somebody use the wrong? Because I don't want to eat poison. And we know that we are eating poison, so it's become a fairly realistic question. And if we could know accurately what is the biochemical content of what we're eating and drinking and breathing, what would we do to change our behaviors to make our health better? It's crazy, when you have friends who take tests, you find out what's in your body. You've got cadmium, you've got lead, you've got all kinds of mercury. You had no idea, Doug and I would probably go in and find, we're clean. Man, we've been eating clean for so long. You find out you're loaded with mercury. Well, where'd that come from? I have no idea. Sushi, So there are all these things that happen to you by accident, and we need to start actually naming them biochemically, putting them on labels, and by the way, using tech. So take your camera, take a picture of your plate, and then have a database behind that saying, oh, that came from Safeway, or that came from Albertsons, or that came from somewhere, and you know, oh, that means that it came from Japan, or China, or Iceland, or wherever it came, and that has mercury in it. So don't buy that one next time. Microbiome genetics is really important. I'm not going to spend any time on that either, but we just found out not too long ago that humans need to be redefined. We actually didn't know what humans were. We thought they were just our own species. Turns out that's not proper. That's not a good definition. A human being is an ecosystem. Only 1/10 of the cells are ours. 90% of the cells are foreign cells. And health has evolved, co-evolved over a long period of time so that these cells all work together. And we've got to understand now, redefining what is a human being, what is human health, and what is human disease based on the microbiome and other species that live in conjunction with us to make us strong. And we haven't done that yet, but that's a really exciting thing, and it's happening mile a minute. And I believe that it's probably the deepest well in terms of human health. Larry Samara is working on this, UCSD is working on this, all kinds of people are taking this on. Ubiome is a great company, check them out. But you take 23andMe, you take there are a lot of tech companies that are coming into this space and give you the information you need at the start. There'll be a lot of science done at Stanford, elsewhere, trying to figure out, given that information, Lee Hood would be Exhibit A, I think, how do I turn this into preventative medicine? And this leads to a term that I made up, but I think it's something that everyone's working on right now, which is augmented immunity. If you look at the very most exciting things in cancer research, almost all of it is kind of moving toward this idea of augmenting the human immune system in one way or another. There are 100 ways of doing it. So how do we do that, and what's the ultimate result? Is it just for cancer? I doubt it. It's probably for all kinds of things. So if it turns out that our immune system is really the best traffic cop for finding the bad guys, getting rid of them, and knowing which bacteria are good, which are not good, all those things that we never knew just by taking massive doses of antibiotics when we were kids, let the immune system do that radar task. And then how do we bump it up? Is there a way of doing that? We're all heading toward that, and that turns out to be a very good way of curing cancer. So my guess is that we'll see a huge amount of effort and money put into that, and it'll have good success. And last and not least, precision medicine. So, all this stuff put together has to have a name, right? And so that's one name for it. But the idea that we're going to leave the time of, trust me, you'll get better in the morning, and go toward a time when we have a deeper understanding of the most detailed part of what makes health in a human ecosystem, and then what things are the first trigger signs of a lack of health, way before there's a symptom. Years before there's a symptom, you'll see, there's a spike in a protein of some kind, and that will lead you to say, Doc, I know that you don't know what to do about this, but I'm going to tell you, I've got 10 times too much of this protein in my blood. I've probably got Crohn's disease. I want you to go find it, which is what Larry Smart did. It's doable, and that's exactly how we're going to deal with health. So this idea of precise knowledge of our cells and how they function, and having the genomic connection to that will be something that will totally change medicine. And this is a multi-decadal project, but we're going to see a lot of that this year. All right, so here we go. And I want to mention, first of all, that I always do this. How did last year go? Well, pretty good, except for one call, which was kind of a disaster. So, and these are all, we'll publish these, you can read them all. I'm not going to read them all now. But the call, I wanted to tell you about the call that I really screwed up on. So I made a call last year about Amazon, and here's what I said. Amazon stumbles as Jeff's appetite finally exceeds his reach and customers are turned off by his megalomaniacal drive. The Fire Phone debacle, off-book rocket adventures, hapless drone delivery scenarios, hachette punishments all lead to a loss of customer and investor confidence. That didn't really happen. I wish it had, but it didn't happen. And so I didn't give myself 0 on that, and here's why. And those of you who follow Amazon probably know already. The part about Jeff being kind of a jerk, that did happen. And the New York Times ran a really brilliant series on Jeff being kind of a jerk and what it's like to be, and then the Harvard Business Review, a little more metric related, took Jeff down from the number 1 CEO in the world to number 87. But much more interesting than that, they have a ranking just for what's called environmental, social, and governance factors, and Jeff appeared as 827th out of 907 CEOs. He is at the bottom of the list of CEOs in those areas. So, and that's Sustainalytics who did that work. And they cited specifically his record on patent infringement lawsuits, concerns about tax avoidance, and controversy about treatment of warehouse and office workers. So the part about Jeff being kind of a dick did actually happen and was recognized publicly, but his customers and his shareholders paid no attention whatsoever. The stock went from $300 to $633 or something. So I totally blew off that call. I took a few points, but not 10. So the result is I'm almost exactly where I was before, 94.7 and holding. And now here for predictions. So these, as you may know if you've done this before with me, I'm just going to read because a year from now I'll be before you defending exactly what I read to you word by word, and so I'll try to be specific about this. Number one, mobile retail purchasing explodes, growing by 30 to 40% in 2016. Phones are good for some things and not so good for others, but they are very good for buying things, often while you're looking at those things in someone else's expensive bricks and mortar store. Which begs the question, when will someone notice that mobile ads don't work? It's an interesting question. Sales is going, people are buying a lot of things with their phone, but mobile ads are ineffective. But nobody's quite, okay. Number two, 3D printing goes mainstream. With a little help from materials such as doped polymers, graphene, and companies like the new HP, 3D printer manufacturing moves from hobby markets to high-end manufacturing markets. Number three, pay-by-phone takes off at last. With Africa in the lead for once, and thanks mostly to Apple Pay, pay-by-phone will now become a true commercial standard, getting common vendor and user acceptance on a global basis. I'm looking forward to that. Number four, cyber insecurity dwarfs cybersecurity. China will likely continue cyber thefts of crown jewel IP. Phishing and watering hole exploits will ramp exponentially in effectiveness and scale, as data from personal ID sources, such as medical and personnel files, is munged with national IP target data. No website is safe, no email secure, as criminal enterprises and theft nations do what they want on the net. Number five, drones crash everywhere. This year will highlight drone safety and security problems with at least one internationally reported major crash incident and likely the first drone plane collision, all leading to a dramatic increase in global government drone regulation. Number six, the content carrier collision. An increasing number of telecom carriers shift business models as they move directly into content and services, while software and some content companies continue moving into carrier roles. Number seven, China extends its tech hardware domination. Computers. Led by Lenovo, China takes the Infomerc model more deeply into the personal computer world, simultaneously creating and dominating a low-end laptop market in the $100 to $200 price range, while doing serious damage by selling at half price to the middle market. With the same past conquests in smartphones, low-end servers, and now laptops, what's left? Which leads us to B, Chinese chips. 2016 will see ramped aggressive steps by the Politburo Standing Committee to build a global chip market presence. Expect more IP thefts, company purchases, and forced IP disclosure in this targeted sector. Number 8, hurrah, internet assistants finally work. Hound and Viv make our newest assistants truly personal, effective, and exciting again, at last finding a permanent place in commonly used apps. Number 9, space goes private. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson turned the page on space commerce. I should mention Paul Allen as well. As private launches and commercial space offerings dominate the news, a trend that will never be reversed. And number 10, the EU wins on data privacy, forcing US and other non-EU e-commerce providers to locate servers in the EU, that is often in Germany, and soon everywhere else that matters. The global cloud becomes balkanized. That's it. I'm all done. We're all done. We can do questions if you'd like, or conversations, or you can challenge every part of what I just said. So are there comments, questions? And then we'll break up, let you guys go home. So, Jeff.
You made two remarks that seemingly are contradictory.
Good.
One was that surveillance will prevail,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was privacy will prevail.
Oh, right. Well, that's a good question. Surveillance will prevail, but the issue of, so you've seen this argument with Germany and the U.S., the lack of the loss of the safe harbor ruling, and because of concerns about privacy of data, despite the fact that there will be a lot of hacking and a lot of surveillance. Nations will insist on server location so that they have political control over the information of their citizens. Now, China,
So they can surveil.
so they can surveil, and or so they can protect their citizens from the surveillance of others. So Germany feels like the NSA is obviously, looking improperly at their stuff. They don't want to have that happen. But the deeper truth, I think, is kind of more like what you're saying, where it's our darn data. You can't have it, and you can't do whatever you were going to do with it, whether it's marketing or whether it's security. We'll take care of that, and then you'll ask us for permission if you want to have it. Yeah, it's.
So every day we hear from the media that the American people are angry. We have a presidential election next year. Do you believe that the American people are angry, or that's a exaggerated story?
I think it's a bizarre story. And if you look at it party by party, which I saw recently a couple days ago, the people who won are the most angry. So the Republicans, who now control every part of the American government except for the presidency, are the angry. They're really, really angry. But they own it. And the people who didn't win, Democrats, aren't as angry. Now, maybe there's some other part to this that I don't get psychologically, but I think it's false in some deep way. And so it's easy to make people feel angry with your radio program if you want to get money, or if you want to get something else from people. Making them angry is a very good psychological technique. And I'm deeply concerned that we're using a lot of mass propaganda in America to affect elections. It's a normal thing to buy ads and try to get people to vote for you. But we are now experts at changing minds and creating frustration, creating anger. And I think that that's being misused. And the result is that people who are pretty nice people end up getting very, very upset about things that they shouldn't even care about. You get situations where someone who's poor, who needs to have free health care, and he is so angry about that affirmative, that action, that Obamacare thing. But he's got it. It saved his family. What are you thinking? So there's a big problem there. I mean, Kentucky would be Exhibit A and all that stuff. So it's a problem, I think, that has to be resolved by time. But it's not going to be resolved by television, because television is being used to manipulate people. I wish we could go back to the old get in the back of the caboose and listen to Lincoln speak against Bryan or somebody. Hear the people speak for themselves and no TV at all. Well, we're not going to go there. Anybody else?
Mark, what
Yeah.
do you think about China's currency becoming a reserve currency?
So Jim and I were talking about this just beforehand. You've all seen that Christine Lagarde, I think she succumbed to pressure from China, maybe from others, to make China a part of the basket of the special drawing rights for currencies. Now, the first thing you got to say is, what's the law? Well, the rules, the rules, Christine, are it must be freely usable, unquote. And she made the declaration that it is now freely usable. The moment that she had made the announcement that China's renminbi would be part of the basket, China made their own public relations announcement. They said, we are so excited to be part of this, and by 2020 we'll be freely usable. I'm not making this up. So they immediately stated the obvious, which is that it's not freely usable. How stupid is this? So, okay, the first call is, this is the end of Christine's career to me. I think Christine Lagarde was already on a knife edge, and I think she's now become a joke. I would mock her if she were sitting here. She's an idiot. And I hope she gets fired tomorrow morning. She's just lost everything. I think the IMF lost all of its credibility. They didn't test for their own test. They lied to us about the fact that the test was not passed. Even the Chinese told the truth, but she didn't tell the truth. She's done. And you kind of worry, is the IMF done? I mean, these institutions like the World Bank and the IMF are struggling. And there's no help if you start lying about everything. There's no benefit to China or anybody else if you base your decisions on lies. So it doesn't have any, you'll read a lot of accounts, Jim, about how it doesn't really mean very much. But I think it means a lot in terms of this issue. The world should not lie just because the bully on the block threatened them. That's what we have to do to have a happy ending. I look forward to having a time when China figures out what they're doing and stops stealing and invents things, and we all get happy together. But the path to getting there isn't telling the bully, okay, you can have my school lunch. That's not how you get there. I've been on the schoolyard. You get there by saying, sorry, you can beat me up all afternoon, but I'm not giving you my school lunch. That's how you get there, and that's what we have to do with China. They've got to learn that they're welcome to be part of the party, but they can't come in and do what they're doing. And Christine and other people who promote that behavior will be seen, I think, by the financial community as not as heroes, but as fools, people who harmed the general community, the world community, through their actions. She would be Exhibit A today. Other questions? Yep.
Mark, where's Microsoft going?
You would ask that question, Steve. So, Satya has fired almost as many people as Meg has. And yet, the people who are at Microsoft still seem pretty excited about Satya Nadella. I think he gets 10 points for trying to turn the ship around and move it away from where it was, kind of copying others, to trying to create stuff like Xbox or HoloLens or new things that are exciting technically, which have a future. So I give him 10 points for that. I don't think that Satya has any understanding of China. And I see this is kind of a strange thing. I see this happening with a number of native India CEOs. I suspect it's because they've grown up with China and they feel like we're from Asia, we're all from Asia, it's going to be okay. But that's not, in my opinion, that's not true. And so bringing a forgiving and spiritual personality to the office of CEO might be a wonderful thing on some level, but not where I live. So I worry about that because I don't think that Satya recognizes that problem for Microsoft. And I don't see yet where the money's going to come from. So it's kind of like give them 10 points for making the turn, but the revenue sources aren't obvious yet. And if you ask yourself, how will Microsoft make money now that they've made Windows free? What? It's like, okay, good luck with that. I kind of sense the idea, but I don't see that it's really going to work yet. So I'm worried about it. I don't understand the strategy. Anybody else? All right, then. It's time to go home. Or, if you're so inclined, it's time to go to the bar, and we'll see you there. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next year.